Thank you everyone for joining in. My name is Tim Stewart. I am president at Visual Decisions. We have been in this space for quite some time now. We started up in about 2002, 2003, coming out of a lean manufacturing consulting organization where we really adapted to collecting information from the shop floor and using that to help drive those improvement processes. And since then, we have scaled up our operation to really look across the entire organization and look at what is possible to do with this combination of technology and process change. And so what we're going to talk about today is creating your roadmap. How do you create that vision for where you are today and where you want to be, and how do you get from here to there? So that's what we're going to be discussing. The way that we go about that is with this process here. We start off by looking at the vision itself and how do we create that map. We look to create a fast start by utilizing the systems and processes that are already in place and how to make those more data-driven, how to get people to utilize what's there more effectively. And that gets us, a fast start, starts to get some payback to fund the rest of the projects. Then we look at what are the capability gaps that are out there, and what additional systems need to be put in place in order to fill those gaps. And then we look to see how do we integrate across the different processes and really break down some of the barriers between, for instance, say manufacturing and warranty, or development, R&D, and manufacturing, and so forth. But throughout it all, we're looking at transforming the culture and the process. And I always use the example of a Fitbit, where I started wearing a Fitbit back in 2013, and I really haven't lost any weight during that time. And it's not that the Fitbit is broken, the Fitbit works just fine. And I keep upgrading the Fitbit, hoping that the new version will just automatically help me lose the weight, but it still hasn't worked yet. And the problem is that I haven't changed my behaviors. I still don't exercise enough. I still, eat things I shouldn't, and so forth. And that's why I haven't made the gains that I was looking for. And it's the same thing with any of these technologies. No matter what you put in place, if people behave the same way tomorrow that they do today, then you're not going to get the gains you expect. And so any part of a transformation effort has to include how do you transform that culture and the processes to take advantage of the new capabilities that you're putting in place with Industry 4.0. But our focus for today is really on mapping out the vision. And so we're going to take a deeper look at the process that we utilize with our customers to really do that, and to look at that art of the possible, incorporate the value-driven process and so forth, while also looking at what are the soft benefits that we can provide. So let's talk about the art of the possible. On the left side, there's kind of a laundry list of different technologies here that are very common within manufacturing companies and overall business environments these days, whether it's machine learning and artificial intelligence that are helping to drive automation in some of the decision-making processes and so forth, and data mining and uncovering information that's provided by the big data and so forth, or the IIoT, which is providing that big data and connecting up all of our different operations and all of our different machines, and censoring up a lot of different things that haven't had the ability to provide us with data and get visibility into those items in the past. Augmented reality is making a huge difference. The last couple of weekly webinars that I've done have touched on some of the capabilities there, and the list goes down. Over on the right side, what we see is actually the World Economic Forum and the list that they've put together. So in the center are some of the mainstream technologies, and then we have maturing technologies in that second ring, and then really emerging technologies in that outer ring. And just for a bigger view of that, highly recommend the work that they're doing. People from all over the world are contributing to that knowledge base, and so it's very good place to go and look to get some of the information about these different technologies. I'm going to focus in on one in particular for a moment, just looking at the industrial Internet of Things and all of the different functions that it can help provide within a manufacturing environment. Looking at different capabilities within operations management, EH&S, quality, maintenance, production execution, supply chain and logistics, manufacturing engineering. I'm not going to go through all the details here, but just giving the sense that each one of those different elements on the previous page, each one of them has a ton of different things that it can do and capabilities that it can provide as we start to drill down within there. And so there's just an absolutely tremendous depth in what these technologies can do to transform an operation. Although, should the focus really be on the new technology? Or should the real focus be on driving improvements to the overall business goals? A business is essentially a money machine. It's there for the purpose of creating cash. And so ultimately, what's important about any of these technologies is how it helps the business do that in the short, medium, and long terms. So this is a McKinsey model, and I like it because it's a very nice visualization of a number of the different levers that are present within the organization to start to look at what is the value that some of these technologies can provide. And over on the right side, we see, just some estimates of what common results companies can get from these different technologies within operations. For us, we utilize this methodology that I'll get into more detail on later, but essentially we start with what are the high-level goals of the organization. It could be to expand market share. It could be to reduce costs. It could be to increase throughput and so forth. It might be that we need to be able to recruit and retain people more effectively. So there are a number of different hard dollar, soft dollar benefits that you could look at as primary opportunities for the company. And then we start to look at, how we actually drive down into what are the causes for the current level of performance with those, start to map those into what can we do about those problems, and what are the enablers that we can put in place from a technology perspective, what are the capabilities that those enablers provide to our business, and how is that actually going to tie to the addressing those problems that we saw earlier. We do have to factor in the soft benefits. One of the things that I really focused on a couple of weeks ago when I talked about augmented reality in manufacturing is kind of making manufacturing cool again. A lot of the customers that I work with are having troubles recruiting a new generation of workers into the plant. So they have an aging workforce. They need to be able to capture that knowledge, but then they also need to bring in and retain younger people into that workforce. And that's something that they're having issues doing. So how is it that we can provide these soft benefits? How can we provide value to the individual in all of the things that we're doing so that we can make life better for our employees, make it easier to recruit people and retain people and so forth, as well as what are the benefits to society? How can we become more environmentally friendly with what we're doing and so forth? And so there's a lot of different soft benefits that we can start to look at in addition to the hard dollar benefits. And once we have all of these different initiatives in place, how do we start to prioritize those? And certainly, the amount of value that we're providing, however we're measuring that, is going to be one of the absolutely primary factors there. But there's also a factor of time to value. If I've got a project that may pay back $1 billion, but it's going to take 20 years to put it in place, that may not be as high a priority as something that will provide me with $1 million payback that I can get in 3 months. And so as we're looking at these different projects, there's certainly a prioritization on both the overall value as well as that time to value. Once we have that prioritization done, the next couple of things that start to come in are interdependency. So some of those things may lay groundwork for future capabilities that we want to put in place, as well as some of these things we may have more confidence in implementing than other items. And so some of the factors there would be, how likely are we to get the cultural adoption on these things? How big of a change is it for our people to utilize these capabilities versus what they're doing today? How big is the process change and so forth that we have to put in place? What other systems do we have to integrate or adapt in order to take advantage of the capabilities of this new technology? And so those are different factors that we want to include within the analysis as well. And then just looking at, how well do these things align strategically to the corporate goals and initiatives that are already in place. So some of the general themes that we want to look at as we go through here, I want to touch on and just discuss, how we kind of look at a lot of these different items. And so first of all, whatever we're putting in place, I'm talking about performance metrics here, but any technology that we're putting in place should align with the processes that we already have. So if we are implementing a lean manufacturing or some form of operational excellence and so forth, then we want things that will support that. If we're looking at doing standard work, how can we include something that will help drive those work instructions and so forth down to the shop level? How can we take information from the machine that shows that operators are running the process the same way every single time? If we're looking at total quality management, how do we really analyze what are the drivers behind the cost of poor quality? How can we minimize the cost that it takes to create good quality and so forth? Maintenance and so forth. All the things that we do there should align with our overall initiatives. And where some of these technologies may not currently align with the way that we do these things, we either need to look at, is that a technology that we want to embrace, or what do we need to do to adapt those existing processes in order to align with the new capabilities? Another theme that we like to put in place is creating a management operating system. And so this is something on the operations side where you can categorize your metrics and the things that you follow on a daily, weekly, monthly basis into safety, quality, delivery, cost, inventory, morale, and environmental factors. And we want to create that alignment all the way from the shop floor up to the COO's office. And traditionally this was done through very paper methods in Microsoft Excel, and it's very time consuming. There's a lot of rework that's done as people are manually maintaining these charts and then putting them into Excel. And then the next level up in the organization has to take the Excel spreadsheets from the level beneath them and consolidate those into one Excel spreadsheet that then goes to the next level above them, and so forth and so on. And there's a lot of opportunities for error. There's a lot of opportunities to drive out the expense of people doing this. And there's just a lot of opportunity for creating that additional visibility and that additional velocity of being able to drive change in the organization, drive that alignment and so forth. And so we've worked with a number of customers to bottle information at the source, so to speak, directly from where the work is happening, and automatically aggregate that up through the reporting capabilities all the way to the COO. And then we work with the COO to set up cadence meetings on a weekly basis where they're reviewing this information, looking at where they're at versus where they want to be. One way to think about all of these different things is that you're really trying to close the gap between planned and actual. Because if you can hit your plans, then as a business, all you have to do is plan better. And then you can execute and match up against where what you think you need to do. So in these processes, we're not only looking at what is the plan versus actual, but what was the reason for the miss, what were the causes and so forth. And I'll talk a little bit about causal factors and so forth in a few minutes, but really what you want to be able to do is not only look at the performance metrics, for instance, first pass yield, but really what was driving that first pass yield? What were the reasons why we didn't hit our target and so forth? Why did we go down instead of up in this particular time period? And then what are the plans that we have in place to address those things? And being able to track not only what's going on, but what we're doing to change that is absolutely critical to making things better in the future. Another critical theme that I want to talk about is bridging that gap between information and operational technologies. So often in a lot of the customers that I talk to, there's a nearly unbridgeable gap between those two sides of technology focus within the organization, and that has to break down. And there has to be a way to create a common language and a common culture between those organizations, so that IT isn't looked at as the organization that prevents work from being done, and IT, is looked at as a value-added service by the entire organization. And operations isn't, flouting governance, going off and doing their own projects and so forth. And it's really a coordinated effort amongst everybody in order to really drive some of these technological changes. Which kind of brings me to fragmentation. And there's a lot of people that have a desktop that kind of looks like this in business, where a lot of our day is taken up by trying to consolidate information from multiple spreadsheets into the spreadsheet that I use for my analysis and so forth, and being able to then perform my daily job. And this is something that we took off the desktop of Plant Manager, that was just looking at all of these different data sources and trying to pull the information together. We were trying to create a map of where the information comes from and goes to and so forth. Just to give an example of that, we were working with a firearms manufacturer here in the States, and they asked us to create a corporate quality dashboard for them. And we said, okay, where do you get your information from today? And they said, oh, it's all in SAP. And I kind of laughed and said, I don't think it's all in SAP. And they said, well, where do you think it is? And I started listing, different systems, and they said, yes, we have, not only just one separate warranty system, we have a homegrown warranty system that we use for the firearms that we do the maintenance on. We have an external repair shop database that's also homegrown, but yet different. And then each of the different ammunition plants has their own Access database or Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that they use. We talked about laboratory information management systems, specific quality systems, statistical process control systems, and so forth. And in the end, we found that they had 57 different systems for quality within that organization. They only had 7 plants. And so being able to consolidate information from all of these different sources, being able to access that information is important for being able to utilize the information that you have today much more effectively, let alone putting additional systems in place and then being able to utilize that data as well. So that brings me to the workshop and being able to create the roadmap for how do we get that value. So some of the questions that we're trying to answer with these workshops is, how do you see the art of the possible? How do you understand all of those different technologies that are out there, how they can apply? How do you actually utilize those to drive value for your organization? And how do you create a fully aligned management system that's going to, link up, what you're doing all the way from the shop floor through logistics and warehousing and everything else to the people that are responsible for that at the corporate level and all the levels in between, seeing their own view of that information? how do you address this without creating even further fragmentation of systems within the organization and so forth? And so those are some of the things that we have to be able to create a vision for and really address during this workshop. So the workshop itself is a specific diagnostic assessment to identify and quantify opportunities in manufacturing operations and define a results-based implementation plan to deliver targeted improvements in business performance. Long sentence. Let me break that down. So first of all, this is customer driven. It's unique to each client in terms of, what is the outcome that we have and so forth. But it's really driven by the client needs rather than any particular software or technology feature and function. We're going to target those problem areas and really quantify, what are the identified opportunities within there. And some of those will be, hopefully most of them are, absolutely dollar driven, but then some are those soft factors that I talked about as well, like employee retention and so forth. Then we, look at how we define that roadmap and go through that prioritization that I talked about earlier and really define that clear timeline and deliverables while minimizing the different risks that you might have in place. And how do we get those gains quickly? So how do we drive immediate results while we're pursuing that longer term path? So the value of the workshop is that, first of all, you can get agreement on where you are today. As I said, some of these companies that I've worked with don't even know, all the different systems that they have in place, what are the different capabilities that they have today and so forth. And you want to be able to drive that visibility of the current capabilities and the alignment of the different organizations and their understanding of those capabilities. And then, how are you going to create value as you move forward from there? You want to create alignment and buy-in from the business and the technical stakeholders, because the change is only going to happen when enough people are bought in. And you have to identify, who are those change leaders within the organization for each one of these different initiatives. It should be a focused roadmap that has short-term deliverables, but also is building towards that long-term vision. That's the way that you're going to lower your risk and you're going to create higher return projects that build off of one another. And then it not just focuses on technology, but it also focuses on the process change and the cultural adoption that's going to be required. So it has to have that balanced approach. So when I think of Industry 4.0, or really any transformation, whether it's digital or not, there's 5 Ps that are involved: process, policy, performance, people, and platform. And as we're going through this workshop process with any customer, and we go through the different stages of this where we're defining and understanding the scope of the problem all the way through prioritizing the enabler deployment and so forth, where the emphasis lies with any given customer can change, and where these check marks really reside can adapt from customer to customer. And part of what we're doing is trying to drive out, where are the key levers in each one of these different areas. So I actually gave more detail on the process that we go through earlier than I normally do, but we start with, what are those opportunities? So we go through a top level opportunity analysis, look at the strategies of the organization. What are the real goals that you're trying to achieve in the next, 3 months, 12 months, 5 years, et cetera. And then looking at what are the impediments to that performance? What are the things that stand in the way of you reaching those goals that you have out there? And then we try to do as much of a root cause analysis as we can to get at, why are those impediments there? And, what are the real drivers that are, preventing the end level performance from happening? Because once we have those root causes identified, and once we have, the real things that are preventing better performance at the bottom level, then we can start to identify what are those different technologies, what are the different software solutions, what are the different hardware solutions and so forth that we can identify that directly address those root causes for the performance gap. And once we have those enablers identified, then we can start to look at, okay, here's the different things that we can put in place, whether it's a technology or whether it's a process change, whether it's training or some other capability that you're adding to the business, and how do we roll those up into a higher level business function that directly addresses those impediments. And then we can start to identify, what are the expected benefits that we can see from these changes that we're hoping to put in place. And by putting numbers behind all of this as we go through, that's going to help us identify really how much benefit we can really see, as well as really prioritizing, what are the different enablers and how are they addressing the root causes, and how much of a lever do those different technologies provide us with. The common process that we go through is, not much different from what anybody else does. It's the execution of the different steps that is really critical. So we're defining what is the scope of the assessment, identifying the people that will take part, identifying and analyzing the available data. So before we really begin the formal process, we'll provide you with a list of things that we want to be able to see based on the different scope that we might have in place. We're going to formulate some hypotheses, and then as we start to walk the process, whether that's in person or whether that's virtually these days, we're going to continually test those hypotheses and create new ideas for what may be those root causes, what are the different enablers that we can put in place, and so forth. And then there's also the process of conducting interviews and being able to really drive down into doing some of the current state mapping, the future state mapping, et cetera, with the different people that may be involved with that process. Then developing the diagnostic document and presenting the findings to the team. Some of the tools that we look at, starting with the strategic objectives. Again, everything begins with the value, what are the high level goals of the organization, what is important to be achieved over the different timeframes. Looking at how the different KPIs, whether they're financial or more operational metrics, really tie into those different objectives. And then drilling down from there through, how are those metrics impacted within the organization, and doing those diagnostics and so forth. And then really looking at how the execution processes within the company are structured. Do you have a continuous improvement process already? Do you have, highly functioning quality organization and so forth? And so there are different things that we look at from that execution point of view that are unique within industries and individual organizations. Looking at some of the different assessment tools that we have in place around both metrics and process. We have very detailed things that we've built up over the years with our different customers around, what are some of the different world-class elements that people are collecting, what are the different processes that are in place, and so forth. Then looking at the different metrics again, and just looking through what are the diagnostics versus the performance metrics. The example I gave earlier about first pass yield is a good one. If my first pass yield goes from a typical 98% down to 87% in some particular time period, what were the defects that happened, and why did those defects occur, and why now? And being able to drive at that level of information, being able to collect that information is critical to being able to then take the steps to improve the process and make sure that those things don't happen again in the future. But all of this should be tied all the way up through those performance metrics, which are the things that the operations team really utilizes on a daily basis to make sure that everything is in alignment from that perspective. But being able to translate that into the financial metrics so that the plant manager is able to see what are those exceptions, how is he doing versus standards and so forth on an hour by hour basis, on a day by day basis, and being able to really look at the gaps in his P&L in real time. So with that, I'm going to go through just a few slides of examples that we've done at different customers. And I'll go through these pretty quickly. I don't want to spend a lot of time drilling into the different examples, but I want to give you a flavor for some of the types of analysis that are done. This first example is we were brought in by an investment firm to analyze the digital capabilities of a potential purchase of theirs. And so we came in and we went through our process, and we looked all the way from sales, production operations, execution, quality, shipping, et cetera, and looked at where were some of the different issues that we found within there. Where did they have disconnects? Where did they have fragmented systems? Where do they have capabilities that weren't being fully utilized? Where did they have gaps in things that they really should have in place in order to achieve their goals and so forth? And so then we mapped out what were some of the different root causes, summary of findings, looking at cross-functional processes and so forth. What are some of the process enablers that they could put in place? And delivered that very quickly. That was actually a very quick analysis for that investment firm. They wanted that turned around within a week, and so we got down to the customer. We spent a few days on site. We collected additional information from them, and then we were able to deliver the report by the end of the week. From another example, we worked with a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer and looking at really their cost of quality, and really drove through an analysis of what were the drivers behind the current level of quality performance for that customer. And so in this particular case, we looked at everything from the supplier to fabrication, assembly, customer service, and technical services out in the field, as well as the interactions with the research and development and product development teams. And so again, we were looking for disconnects, lack of capability, what were the gaps and so forth, what were some of the opportunities or enablers that they could put in place, as well as how could they better utilize the systems that they had, what were the process changes that they could put in place, as well as what are some training and cultural opportunities to really drive better adoption of some of these things. We went through that 6-block analysis, the inverted pyramid, and then the right side up pyramid that we looked at earlier. And as we go through that process, down in the lower right-hand corner here, we see some of the forms that we utilize within our analysis of looking at what are the desired standard work practices for the different organizations. Where do they score, within each one of the different plants, within different areas of the plant and so forth, and as well as shipping and distribution and logistics and planning and everywhere else, and really looking at where are they from a raw capability, where are they from an execution point of view, and then where are those critical gaps that need to be addressed. And so this was just an example, around the total cost of quality and how they could address the total cost of quality. And then what this drove to was an implementation plan that was phased out on how they could, start by leveraging the existing data that they already had to drive new capabilities for the business, looking at filling some of those data collection gaps, and really putting in capabilities, for instance, on SPC and predictive quality and maintenance, and doing better process capability, tying these things into a live failure modes and effects analysis, so that they could, in real time, look at what were those failure modes, what was the effect that was having within the organization, instead of doing a one-time FMEA that just kind of sits on a wall or in a drawer someplace. And then integrating across processes and looking at how can we tie the information that's coming from the field and technical services into our shop floor analysis. How can we drive all of that data back into product development and have them do more of a true design for manufacturing, design for Six Sigma process, and so forth. And so these are kind of the extended capabilities that build off of getting really good at executing with what you have today. So some closing thoughts around all of this before I put this out for questions. And please, go ahead and put some questions into the Q&A or into the chat as we're going through here. But some of the key factors for successful exercise here. This can't all be us, first of all. We have to have support from executive management. This is a significant effort in order to do the current state mapping, the future state mapping, having the data that's required, devoting the time to the conversations and so forth that have to take place. And so this isn't something where you just tell us, hey, analyze the process for us, and we magically come up with all of this. We have to make this a highly interactive process. We have to collaborate with the clients to really define what the deliverables are going to be. And the biggest questions are around scope here. And so from this, are we looking at the entire corporation? Are we looking at a specific plant or a specific line? One division within the organization? Are we looking across everything, or is this something where we're focused on a particular topic such as quality? Adequate preparation. So before we ever start, we want to have conversations around how can we prep as much data as we can before we start the on site or virtually these days, and gather the appropriate information that is required for this process. And then along those same lines, typically we get out to the shop floor and we walk the process, or if it's more systems based in the office, for example, planning and scheduling, sitting down with the planners and walking through their daily processes and so forth. These days we have to find ways to work around that and do these things virtually, whether it's kind of a virtual walkthrough of the plant where someone has a camera and we're doing that, or if it's just very detailed as we go through and have explanations of each step in the process, maybe using flow maps or something else. So those are different things that we can put in place, but we are still happy to travel out to our customers and do these things. And kind of the last point that I want to emphasize again is there has to be balance here. I know that for Industry 4.0, the focus is on technology, whether that is software issues, hardware issues, or capabilities, etc. But you have to have that focus on the people, and you have to have that focus on the process in order to make this work. And once again, with Fitbit, if you don't put in the work, you're still not going to lose the weight, even though you're carrying the Fitbit around. And it's the exact same thing with all of these technologies and so forth. I will put in a plug for next week's webinar. So next Tuesday at the same time, we'll be doing a webinar on how you create that culture of data-driven improvement. And I'm honored to have one of my partners, Sandalwood Engineering and Ergonomics, that will be doing that panel discussion with me. And we'll talk about our joint experiences in really helping to drive that culture, and how do you get the entire organization to be much more data-driven. So with that, I will ask if there are any questions to please put those into the Q&A. There don't seem to be any questions. So with that, I'll wrap it up and thank everyone for attending. If you don't mind, I will probably email each one of you to follow up and primarily get some feedback on what was presented today, and whether you think that that's helpful. Are there any gaps in what we're presenting and so forth? And then whether or not there's any opportunity to work directly with you. There's something in the Q&A. Data integrity is, essentially the question, and whether there's kind of a validation trick on data integrity. And data integrity is indeed a very large topic within here. Whether that is looking at the information that's currently in your ERP systems and so forth, or whether that's the data that's coming from any of these IoT sensors that's out there, or if you're looking to do machine learning, you have to be able to adjust that data before you put it into that machine learning process. And that is an absolutely critical first step, because if you don't, for instance, if the plant lost power on Tuesday and you're on next Tuesday now, you don't want to predict that the plant's going to lose power again. It was just a chance storm or something like that. So for any of these different technologies, the data quality is very critical. There's a variety of different ways of addressing those things, and it really depends highly on the data that we're looking at. If you're looking at streaming data from the shop floor, you can utilize various algorithms that look for anomalies or disruptions in that data stream. If you're looking at information in an ERP system or something like that, you look at integrity links, you look at, again, expected boundaries and so forth, and, try to match all those things up. There's algorithms that you can put in place that look for misspellings and things like that, as well as, things that are off by, say, an order of magnitude. One of the things that we ran into one time trying to analyze information from a laboratory information management system was the LIM software allowed any decimal value to be put in place. And so they were looking at a percentage value, and some of the people on the first shift people were putting things in as 0.93, 0.87, et cetera, and the third shift guy was putting things in as 87.5 or 93.2 and so forth. And so what that ended up doing is if you try to graph that out, or if you try to put that into an algorithm and so forth, you really don't get good results from it. And so we had to be able to identify that and then standardize the process. So kind of a complex answer to that, but it's a very complex issue, and something that we do look at as we go through that process. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for attending today, and I look forward to following up with each of you individually. Thank you. Bye-bye.